Let's review Pokemon Horizons Episode 1, The Pendant of Beginning, Part 1. We begin this new series with the cinematic intro to the Pokemon world, and here we meet our new protagonist, Liko, a girl from the Paldea region who's come to a Kanto boarding school. Why wasn't this Naranja Academy? This episode is all about introducing Liko's character. Right off the bat, I found her to be very endearing and relatable. She's a shy girl who's kind of awkward and has a hard time expressing herself to others, which is why she talks to herself a lot, and gets stressed out pretty easily. Just little moments of her being too shy to mention that she loves Nidothing, to her being really nervous about picking her partner Pokemon, all help characterize this budding Pokemon trainer. Speaking of which, here we're also introduced to Liko's starter Sprigatito. I really like the dynamic between the two, because Sprigatito's fickle and carefree nature contrasts Liko, who's more reserved and easily flustered, which will force both of them to grow in their own ways. There's definitely growing pains, but you can see that Liko is trying her best to slowly overcome this. While all of this is happening though, we notice the rising Voltacular is looking for Liko for some reason, as well as Amethio. He's after Liko's pendant that was given to her by her grandmother, but obviously she won't give it up due to how suspicious this guy is. The battle against the Rhydon dude was pretty cool, as it shows the progression between Liko and Sprig's relationship. Don't know how this guy let himself get disrespected like that though. Eventually, we get the badass entrance to our boy Friede, who's here to make the save. Now that was an awesome character introduction right there. Although short, the battle between Charizard and Ceruledge was really awesome. The action and choreography was on point. During their battle, Liko's about to get hit, however her pendant is able to protect her with the mysterious energy shield. And that's where the episode ends. Honestly, I am really impressed with this first episode. Not only was it a great introduction to our new protagonist, but also a fantastic start to this series. It gave us a glimpse into the characters, the tone, the music, and even the battles. So now it's all up to part 2 to see if this series debut truly stuck the landing. This episode's rating is an 8 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons Episode 2, The Pendant of Beginning, Part 2. Continuing from the last episode, Liko's about to get hit when suddenly her pendant comes to the rescue and... What the heck is that?! There's a whole Pokemon in there. And not just any Pokemon, but a pre-evolution of Terapagos? This is a pretty huge deal because as of the making of this review, this Pokemon, or at least this form of a Pokemon, has not been revealed. Now this is how you get people excited for a new series. The interesting part about all of this as well is that it seems like Amethio didn't know the pendant could do that. So that begs the question, why is he after it so badly? I really like this because it just puts so many questions in your head, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this mystery continues to unravel. The rest of the episode is dedicated to Liko meeting the rising Voltaculars. We get to hang out in their airship and even see the Pokemon that hang around there, including Fuecoco and this random Quaxly. Is Nidothing on the ship? Now although Liko is hanging with the crew, not much is explained yet as the explorers are still on hot pursuit. So Friede, along with Captain Pikachu, take the charge in order to stop them. This is the episode where Friede truly gets to shine and allows us to get to know him better. Based off his actions and interactions with the rest of the crew, it seems like he's a little reckless and unpredictable, but there's actually a method to his madness. He makes the crew fly in a thunderstorm, but this was all for him to set up the proper conditions to beat Amethio in battle. I don't know if this was intentional or not, but I love how Friede carries the spirit of Ash Ketchum. He basically feels like what an older Ash would be. And can I just say, I'm really impressed with how Captain Pikachu battles. They really went out of their way to separate it from Ash's Pikachu. He's so cool. Eventually, Liko tries to stop the fighting by giving in, but Sprigatito wasn't having any of that. This was a great moment, as Sprig is helping Liko get out of her comfort zone and tackle the conflict head on. You can really see a bond starting to form between these two. Yeah, too bad Amethio steals Sprigatito and the episode ends. Excuse me, what? This is an awesome way to start a new series. We're diving headfirst into the plot with no signs of stopping just yet. Now this is how you hook your audience. This episode's rating is an 8 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons Episode 3, As Long As I'm With Sprigatito. Now something I really liked about this episode is the opening where we get the flashback of Liko's grandmother. She talks about how Liko's fears about going on a journey can be put to rest when she has Pokemon by her side, which is basically the message behind the whole episode. Liko is without Sprigatito and it's feeling really bad, but I really like her confidence in trying to get it back. The rising Voltaculars have a couple things they need to take care of. Some of them are looking for Sprigatito, while the others are dealing with the aftermath of the attack on the airship. And then there's Ludlow. It was really cool to see them do stuff, like Murdoch is using Rockruff to sniff out Sprigatito, Orla is dealing with all the engineering stuff, and Molly gets Liko's help to get medicine supplies. Speaking of which, there's a whole segment in this episode dedicated to kind of reintroducing Pokemon centers, and something interesting to note is the continuity to past series, showing the past partner Pokemons that Nurse Joy uses in different regions, and even showing Nurse Joy with her same design from Pokemon Journeys. Things really start to pick up though once they catch Kanya slipping. What I really appreciate about the episode is that they don't fall for her basic disguise. Because Rockruff has good smelling, he can tell that this is someone from the Explorers. That was a great way to use him. And then of course we get another clash between Friede and Amethio. Even though it's not really the main focus, it's nice to see that the action and choreography is still on point. Hopefully that stays consistent with this series. And then of course we get the reunion of Sprigatito and Liko. It's funny though, because earlier Liko was a bit worried that Sprigatito was in danger and I don't know, maybe being tortured or something, but it was actually chilling, bro. It was getting fed by Kanya. It was having a great time. And shout out to this episode because the first two didn't really do a good job of characterizing Kanya. She just seemed like generic evil grunt woman. But here they gave her a lot of personality. I love how much she loves Sprigatito. It's a very cute side to her that I really enjoyed, and it's funny to think that she was hoping to stay with Sprigatito the whole time. In the end though, the group were able to leave, and it's great to see that Liko has some more confidence now that she has Sprigatito, tying back to the flashback with her grandmother in the beginning. So yeah, I think this was a pretty fine episode. Nothing too crazy, it's really more the resolution of the premiere episodes, but still a great way to kick things off. Now Liko is officially part of the Rising Voltaclers, so I can't wait to see what adventures they go on next. And speaking of which, we get a teaser with Roy, since he's gonna be coming up in the next episode. They gotta watch out for the Explorers though, cause looks like they're tracking them. This episode's rating is a 7 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons Episode 4, The Treasure That Washed Ashore. Now this is the episode where we get the proper introduction to Roy. He's a boy who's living in a small island off the coast of Kanto. He takes online Zoom classes, good to see he still gets his education. And you can tell from the get-go, this is a kid who's just itching to go on an adventure and catch his own Pokemon. We even get a moment where he's talking to his classmates and they're all catching Pokemon and challenging gyms. Meanwhile, he hasn't really done that yet and is waiting for his partner Pokemon. Well, it's a good thing Fuecoco fell off the ship. Yeah, Fuecoco gets lost, but it's okay because he ends up finding Roy and they form a really cool friendship. Something I really appreciate about this episode is that not only are we introduced to Roy, but this also kind of feels like a true introduction to Fuecoco. He's kind of been in the background up until now, but here we see Liko show more interest in him. We basically learn how he joined the ship because he admires Friede's Charizard a lot, and also he likes to sing. That's a pretty cool tease to Skeledirge. Another cool thing about the episode is how the tone is a bit different from the past three. While the introduction to Liko was all serious with the Explorers going after her and the pendant, this one's a bit more laid back, which actually fits Roy perfectly. Here we get to see what it's like on the island. There's some funny antics with Fuecoco eating wild Pokemon's food and then Liko having to suffer the consequences of it all. And then we get the eventual meeting of Roy and Roy? And then we get the eventual meeting of Liko and Roy. Now, something that's really interesting is the fact that it seems like Roy's Pokeball and Liko's pendant are connected, as they both start to glow when they're close to each other. Now, that is pretty cool. I'm very interested to see where this goes. When it comes to the Pokeball specifically though, it seems like it's just an ancient Pokeball that he got from his grandfather and he can't seem to open it. But he really wants to get out of the island, have his own adventure, and hopefully find out the truth about this. I've seen this before, and I'm a little worried. But yeah, all in all, this episode wasn't too crazy. It's mostly set up for the next episode, as Roy doesn't even officially join the Rising Voltaclers just yet. But I like this. It's actually taking the time to set up the foundation and groundwork. That way things will go a lot smoother and pay off later on. Also, two last things I want to mention. One, Friede is still the best character in the show. He's not even the focus of today's episode, but he still has a really awesome moment at the end where he's just dodging and weaving string shots. And two, Ludlow is definitely Nidothing. Change my mind. This episode's rating is a 7 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons Episode 5. I Found You, Fuecoco. Continuing from last week, this episode has Roy thinking about Fuecoco and really wanting to be with it. So he sneaks onto the Rising Voltacler ship to meet him again, only to get blasted by Captain Pikachu. I love that, it makes sense because he's kind of a total stranger to him. Now what I love about this episode is that it's all about the connection between Roy and Fuecoco. So here they're just trying to come together and hopefully have Fuecoco be Roy's partner Pokemon. Unfortunately, he's asleep, and it makes sense. It's, you know, midnight. What are you doing here, Roy? So it takes a while to find him. But I like this. It actually gives us some time for Liko to talk about her experience with Sprigatito and how things weren't so perfect. I feel like it was a nice moment for them to have together. The next day, however, Friede has to continue his mission on trying to fix what's going on with the Rising Voltacler ship. I like how they get the idea to basically patch up the holes using Weedle and Caterpie String Shot. Unfortunately though, that's gonna have to wait because the explorers have returned and they're here for Liko and her pendant. What's really awesome about this time is that we get to see the explorers fight the other members of the Rising Volt Tacklers, since Liko, Roy, and Friede are outside the ship. Everyone plays a part in this episode. Except Ludlow. The explorers are actually really smart in this episode because they realize since Friede is outside the ship, if he sees trouble then he's gonna come back, and the direction he came from is probably where Liko was at. Because of this, Kanya is able to find Liko. There is a missed opportunity here though because they could have shown the fight between Sprigatito and Golduck. It's still early in the series, so this is one of Liko's first fights and it gets kinda skipped over. The episode makes up for it though by focusing on Roy and Fuecoco. On top of getting the wild Pokemon necessary to fix the Rising Volt Tackler's ship, Roy is also able to hold his own in battle with Fuecoco. It actually struggles at first, as we've seen previously that Fuecoco can't really use Ember, but I love the fact that Roy and Fuecoco are able to connect through music. The song that Roy sings to fire up Fuecoco was the perfect way to help him set up his Ember. That was the highlight of the episode for me. And unexpectedly, the episode ends with a cliffhanger, with Amethio heading straight towards Liko now that she's on the battlefield. And can I just say, man, I love Amethio. This guy does not mess around. Yeah, he was fighting Friede, but as soon as he saw his target, he put that battle to the side. This man does not waste any time. I can't wait to see what happens next. This episode's rating is a 9 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons Episode 6, the Ancient Poké Ball. Continuing from last week, Amethio is after Liko's pendant when suddenly she's protected once again. No Terapagos this time, but it's kind of interesting to see that this pendant will always protect her from harm. Also, as seen from a prior episode, Liko's pendant and Roy's Pokeball are definitely connected, as Roy's Pokeball is starting to glow. I was not expecting to see this so early, but man was it a great way to kick things off. Seeing as how he can't get the pendant by force, Amethio has to change tactics and decides to battle Liko and Roy in hopes of winning and being able to take Liko along with the pendant. This was pretty cool as we finally get to see Liko and Roy battle together. Yeah, they get their asses handed to them, but they do try their best. Now what I like about this is that they don't win because of the power of friendship and anime logic. Yeah, I like how they kept this realistic. When things get really bad, however, Liko tries to use the pendant to protect her once again, which activates Roy's Pokeball, revealing a shiny Rayquaza that also looks terrestrialized as well. Holy crap, again, I was not expecting to see this much stuff in the beginning of the episode. This was a surprise to everyone, and what's even crazier is that Roy can't even recall Rayquaza to the Pokeball. He just kind of attacks everyone and then leaves. Man, not only was this a perfect way to start this episode, but it's also the perfect way to set up Roy's adventure. We already know that he wants to leave his island to search for legendary Pokemon, but now he has an actual goal, to get Rayquaza once again. Now, although all the heavy action is in the beginning of the episode, the rest is really good as well. The gang talks to Roy's grandfather and tries to learn more about the Pokeball. Not much is really learned, he just found it as a kid in the beach and then he gave it to Roy. And then of course we have the moment where Roy catches Fuecoco. It was such a wholesome scene. I even like the fact that Fuecoco's senpai Charizard is the one who gave him the Pokeball so Roy can catch him. God, just everything about this episode is so freaking good, man. Roy officially joins the Rising Volt Tacklers, the gang are ready to leave and head for the Paldea region, and there's even the fact that Ludlow finds the tracker that the explorers left behind and destroys it. Speaking of which, at the end of the episode, Amethio has a meeting with the rest of the explorers, which is really cool because it teases some of the other admin members. I don't know about you, but it kinda gave me Akatsuki vibes. It also kinda sets up an arc for Amethio, as he failed his mission and is not looking good to the rest of the team. Man, what else could I say? This was a really good episode. It perfectly wraps up everything in this introductory arc, and it's crazy to think that we already have an arc in the beginning of the series, and now we can really get into the true adventure of Liko and Roy. This episode's rating is a 10 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons Episode 7, Special Training, Captain Pikachu. So right away, this episode begins with the deconfirmation that Ludlow might be Nidothing. Well, it was a good theory while it lasted. Turns out there's a secret final member of the Rising Volt Tacklers called Dot, and she's always stuck in her room and is the one who kind of gathers information for the rest of the team and even helped create the app that they use. Although Liko and Roy don't officially get to meet her, it's very obvious that this is Nidothing. You can hear the Nidothing theme playing in the background, and there's even the Quaxley that comes in and out of the room. So I guess the whole mystery is kind of over, at least for the audience. Still, I wonder what role she's gonna play. Here, Roy wants to learn more about Rayquaza, but apparently he's not worthy enough until he gets better at battling. So Liko and Roy receive training from none other than Captain Pikachu. Now what I will say, I think this episode did a great job at showing the progression of Liko and Roy. Also, I really like the fact that the events of the previous episode helped push the plot forward in this one. Because of how badly Liko and Roy did against Amethio, they want to get better in case they have to fight him again. In the beginning of the episode, they both have a battle and you can tell that they're very inexperienced. They're both spamming the same attack, there's no real strategy, and then when they actually have to face a serious opponent like Captain Pikachu, they stand no chance at all. Like literally, they can't even touch the captain. He is a beast. But what was cool about this training is that it allowed Liko and Roy to kind of learn about their opponent's movements. It made them think more, strategize more. The whole training kind of consisted of Liko and Roy trying to make contact with Captain Pikachu as it uses double team to kind of evade. But eventually Liko's able to figure out the zigzag pattern that Pikachu uses to use that attack, and eventually find the real one. They still don't do much, but it was still really cool to see them pick up on that. And this actually pays off when they both have another battle in the end, because they do a lot better, especially Liko. This was pretty cool, just like the sheer contrast of how they were in the beginning of the episode to now really shows the progress that they made in this episode. And in the end, Liko wins the battle when Sprigatito learns Quick Attack. That was very well deserved. And honestly, I kinda wish that this was Liko's first official win, and not defeating Kanya off screen. But yeah, with Liko and Roy doing much better in battle now, the mysterious dot finally gives them a hint that could help them find Rayquaza. And apparently it has some connection to the Paldea region. But yeah, all in all, this was a pretty fine episode, and some much needed training and progression for Liko and Roy since, you know, they are just starting their adventure. This episode's rating is a 6 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons Episode 8, The Secret of the Unopened Door. Alright, so this episode, nothing really major happens, it's kind of more of a slice of life episode. While the gang continue their travel to Paldea, they have to stop by a town to get some more resources cause they're running out of food. They have a little rock, paper, scissors to decide who's gonna stay on the ship and take care of the Pokemon, and it's funny because Roy loses, but he really wants to go out and try to find out more about Rayquaza. So Liko decides to stay and take care of the chores instead. It actually worked out perfectly though, because she wanted to stay and watch a Nidothing livestream. Also, I like the little touch of how even though Liko is traveling, she's still taking classes online. Wait, so like, what was the point of the school to begin with then? Now when it comes to the Rising Volt tacklers, there isn't really much to say other than they're running errands, but it is cool to see Roy's experience in a city for the first time. Cause you know, he grew up in an island his whole life. So it was nice to get his excitement for seeing new Pokemon and people. Now the main focus of this episode is actually on Dot, aka Nidothing. In this episode, we get a much better look at her, and she doesn't seem like the best person. Liko tries her best to be nice and open up to her, but I guess it's true what they say, never meet your heroes. It's also funny too because she tries to use Nidothing as a way for them to bond together, not knowing that she's actually talking to Nidothing. And then when it's time for the live stream, Liko asks for advice, which Nidothing actually reads, which embarrasses Liko and causes her to freak out, which Dot actually hears during the live stream and causes her to freak out. It's a really funny scene, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, I actually do like the fact that Liko is trying her best to get to know Dot, and I even like the little touch she adds about how her love of Nidothing is what's helped her like Pokemon even more. So it seems like little by little, Liko's gonna start breaking into her shell until finally Dot decides to come out and be open with them. Oh yeah, and there's also this subplot about Murdoch and Friede's secret stash of sweets, but they get a small victory in the end when she actually does eat the donuts that he left behind. So you know, baby steps. But yeah, all in all, this was a fine episode, and nothing too crazy, but also nothing bad either. Kind of uneventful, but you know, nice moments all throughout, I guess. But on the bright side though, the episode ends with us arriving at Paldea, so that's something to look forward to as well. This episode's rating is a 5 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons Episode 9, Arrival in Paldea. In this episode, the group finally arrive at the Paldea region, which I am so excited for. It was cool to see the landscape of the region. We got to see Mesagosa, Naranja Academy, Rip Uva Academy though, and we even got to see sprinkles of some more Paldean Pokemon. Now it turns out that the mission that the Rising Volt tacklers were assigned to do was to bring Liko back home. Liko clearly doesn't want her journey to end, but she's being very passive about it, and it's basically going like, it is what it is, I guess. So the main focus of this episode is Liko trying to gain the confidence to finally say what she really wants to do. Now here is where we officially meet Alex, Liko's father. And damn it, that's not Ash Ketchum. Rest in peace, the Ash Ketchum is Liko's father theory, I guess. Come on guys, did you actually really think that? At Liko's house, we also get to meet Fido. And oh my god, this Pokemon is even cuter in the anime. It's funny though, because Liko's so excited to see Fido again, causing Sprigatito to get jealous, but Liko doesn't really notice this, especially since she's really caught up in her head about having to stay home and end her journey. Thankfully though, after spending a night thinking in the airship and then talking to some of the Rising Volt tacklers, she finally has the answer she's looking for, and that's basically to follow her own path. She was more focused about her father since he was the one that's worried about Liko going out, but that's also a little developmental moment for him, coming to terms with the fact that Liko's growing up and is old enough to go out on her own. On the way back home though, Liko gets robbed by a wild Lechonk, and I really like how this scene played out because it fits with the whole game mechanic of, oh, you can't go in the tall grass if you don't have a Pokemon because wild Pokemon attack. This Lechonk ain't really a big deal, but Liko doesn't have anything else besides Sprigatito, who's back home. Luckily, it does come back and make the rescue, and she's able to quickly ward it off. And in the end, Liko's able to tell her father the truth that she wants to continue her journey, and he accepts. So all in all, I enjoyed this episode. It was a nice character-focused episode for Liko, and it was nice to see the Paldea region. And we even got a hint about the shiny Rayquaza that Roy's looking for, as Liko's father reveals that Brassius might have seen a rare Pokemon. So now it's onward to the next destination. Real quick though, I just want to point out that Liko looked kinda dumb because she literally saw Needlething's costume at the airship and didn't really think about it, she just kinda left. That was stupid. But besides that though, this episode's rating is a 7 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons Episode 10, Nemona and Brassius. Following the advice of Liko's father, the gang visit Artisan in hopes of learning more about shiny Rayquaza from Brassius. It's here where Liko and Roy meet Nemona, and my goodness am I so happy to see her. She's her usual battle-loving self and even think that Liko and Roy want to battle her, but she learns about the whole Brassius thing and she in fact is looking for Brassius as well because he's been taking some time off his gym for some reason. Now something I really like as well is the fact that since Liko is from Paldea, she does recognize Nemona as a champion ranked trainer. Now it turns out that Brassius did see shiny Rayquaza, but is having artist blocked and is trying to make these amazing sculptures, but just nothing seems to be working out for him. And Liko actually picks up on his artist block as her father is an artist as well, so she knows some of the behavior patterns. Eventually they are able to boost his spirits though, and specifically Roy since he's the one who's looking for shiny Rayquaza. And then we get something I was not expecting in this episode, a gym battle. Motivated by Roy, Brassius challenges Roy to a gym battle to see if he's worthy to face off against Rayquaza. And man was this cool to see. Not only was the action and animation good, but even the music was on point. It's so cool listening to these gym themes from Scarlet and Violet translated to the anime. But now when it comes to the battle specifically, yeah, Roy stands no chance, but it makes sense because he is a starting trainer. And I even like the moment where Fuecoco gets so mad that he keeps missing that he ends up learning Stomping Tantrum. And then we get to the climax of the battle where Brassius terrestrializes Sudowoodo. This is the first time seeing true terrestrialization in the anime, and I gotta say, it looks pretty good. But yeah, even though Fuecoco does have the type advantage at this point, he still ends up losing, which I'm glad they went this route. It's way more realistic. But still, this was enough to get Brassius back to his old self and even accept more gym challengers again. And in the end, Liko and Roy are left with a hint about shiny Rayquaza. So now we know what Liko and Roy's next destination is. So in the end, I think this was a really good episode. Like I said, great characterization of Nemona. I really hope we get to see more of her. We get a bit more progression about Rayquaza, and even Brassius was handled really well. Hopefully this leads to Roy doing more gym battles. This episode's rating is a 9 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons Episode 11, The Arboliva's Forest. Following the instructions of Brassius, Liko, Roy, and Molly explore the Arboliva Forest in search of clues for the shiny Rayquaza. And heck yeah, Nemona's still here. Oh, never mind. Damn it! Now, I was actually quite surprised at how much focus Molly got in this episode. She was easily the highlight. Turns out there was a recent forest fire in this area, which is why Molly decided to tag along to help wild Pokemon. She actually helps nurse a wild Paldean Wooper that was turning into a raisin, and I even love how her tough attitude intimidates the wild Pokemon enough to let her do her job. Nursing the Wooper actually proves to be beneficial later on, but before I get to that, we actually gotta talk about Molly's backstory. We learned that Molly comes from a family of Pokemon doctors, but chose a different path, opting to travel to help various Pokemon in need that probably wouldn't go to a Pokemon Center. This revelation, on top of her appearance and Chansey, basically confirms that she's an edgy Nurse Joy, which is pretty cool. This slow revelation of her past also gives us an interesting conversation between her and Liko, where they talk about their families and the differences between not knowing what you want to do yet versus having your future dictated by your family. Now the other plot of the episode is this Titan Arboliva Roy and the others discover, holding an ancient Pokeball just like Roy's. This raises a lot of interesting questions because I'm pretty sure we all just thought that Roy had the only Pokeball like that. They eventually have a battle against it, and I like how Liko and Roy have to be a bit more creative and not rely on Fuecoco's fire moves to prevent another forest fire. They do a pretty good job. And eventually, the Wooper that Molly treated defends them, which helps calm down the Arboliva. I will say though, the episode does end kind of abruptly, which felt kind of weird, but I also understand that this is a continuing storyline, so we'll probably find out more in the next one. Also, one final detail, the episode starts with Liko seeing the evidence connecting Dot to Needlething and coming to the conclusion that Dot is just a superfan, which makes Liko look really dumb. I hope it's not a reoccurring joke. This episode's rating is a 6 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons, Episode 12, The Future I Choose. To help Arboliva and the wild Pokemon, Liko, Roy, and Molly work together to replant the forest. Now this section is pretty nice, and once they're able to get cell service, they even reach out to the rest of the Volt Tacklers for help. MVP of the beginning though has to go to Ludlow. He actually does something here. Bro really had a whole Quagsire with him, and uses Rain Dance to water the plants. That was a nice surprise. Now although this part was fine, the real intrigue of the episode comes when Liko's pendant resonates with Arboliva, which not only makes the baby Terapagos looking dude come out again, but even triggers this sort of vision of the ancient adventurer. Okay, now we're talking. There's been a lot of mystery so far regarding the pendant and the Ancient Poké Ball, but this episode finally gives us some answers. Not everything, but enough to give us an idea of what's to come. Like how the picture book Liko's father made was the very same story Roy grew up listening to, which was inspired by stories from Liko's grandmother. It's honestly really cool to see how Liko and Roy's story are intertwined. When it comes to the Ancient Adventurer specifically, we learned that along with Shiny Rayquaza and Arboliva, he traveled with 4 other hero Pokemon and resided in this place called Paradise. My money is on this place being Area 0, which might explain its connections to Terapagos. This is cool because now it at least gives Roy a more concrete goal, to collect all the hero Pokemon. This still doesn't answer our questions about the pendant though, but thanks to Liko's mom, Luca, whose side note is not Serena. I don't know why some people still thought this. Some of y'all really need to move on. Thanks to Luca, we learned that Liko's grandmother is in the Galar region, so that's the group's next destination. This is actually great since Galar didn't really get much time to shine in the Gen 8 anime. So yeah, although this episode was pretty dialogue and information heavy, it did a great job at unveiling some of the mystery and even adding a few more, and also progressing the story. Oh yeah, and that weird connection issue in the beginning of the episode, it was actually Spinel from the Explorers, so I'm expecting a confrontation really soon. This episode's rating is a 7 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons, Episode 13, A Sudden Picnic. Well, it only took 13 episodes, but we finally have our first bad Pokemon Horizons episode. It starts out with the ship suffering from problems, again, which delays the gang's trip to Galar. Instead, they decide to have a picnic while that gets sorted out, and from here, the rest of the first half of the episode is just a straight up recap of the series so far. I will give Horizon some credit though, at least the recap wasn't anything like the recap episodes from last year. But still, this kinda sucked, I'm not gonna lie. The whole point was to show Liko being grateful for her journey and to show how much her, Roy, and Dot have come, but like, it's way too early to be having a recap like this. If you really need a refresher on the series, you can just rewatch the first 12 episodes. Plus, there have already been other episodes focused on showing their development that have done this way better, so this was redundant. The second half of the episode was a bit better, but still not by much. It's about Liko continuing her quest to befriend Dot by letting her have her own picnic in the ship, and I will admit it was kinda nice since the experience even helped Dot make a video about picnics, but then it ends with Dot literally sending a picture as Needlething and Liko still being an idiot and not realizing the connection. They're really gonna drag on this corny joke, huh? As for Roy, he chases after a Wattrel that steals his food and grabs his attention since he realizes he can't fly, but nothing truly happens here just yet. It's just set up for the next episode. And speaking of which, the episode ends with Spinel of the Explorers finding the Rising Voltackler ship, which does have me excited for the next one, but that doesn't really do much for this one, does it? This episode honestly felt like a waste of time, especially since the plot of the next episode could have easily taken place here. This episode's rating is a 3 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons, Episode 14, Fly, Wattrel. While the problems with the Rising Voltackler ship get sorted out, Roy returns to the wild Wattrel in order to befriend it and teach it how to properly fly. Now, unlike the previous episode, this one actually gives us proper time with Roy and Wattrel. I really liked Roy's kindness and determination to help it. Felt very Ash-like, which definitely brought a sense of familiarity to the plot. Wattrel clearly has a fear of heights, so Roy tries to help it slowly build its confidence by jumping from small heights until it can eventually fly. He even makes a little rig using Ludlow's fishing rod, which made for a really fun segment. In the end, Wattrel is able to fly and meet up with his friends, but has grown attached to Roy, so he ends up catching it. Finally, another Pokemon other than Fuecoco. As predictable as this was, especially since the eye catch spoiled it, I definitely feel like it was earned thanks to the friendship that Roy and Watchro formed in this episode. Another neat aspect was Murdoch's presence in this episode. I really enjoyed him. From him giving Roy the Pokeball to catch Watchro, to him thanking Liko for befriending his niece Dot, to him geeking out over spices and running errands with Liko. It was nice to get more time with him, and especially to see him interact with Liko as we haven't had much of this combination yet. I think what's great as well is the fact that Spinel uses the whole spice thing to lure Liko into trying to get something nice for Murdoch, but instead falling for his trap. Before I get ahead of myself though, we gotta talk about the Friede plot, cause he discovers what's been causing the disturbance in the ship and even gets ambushed by Spinel's Pokemon. This is where Friede whips out the Terra Orb and terrestrializes Charizard into a Dark type. It was an awesome usage of the mechanic. Not only did it make Charizard and Friede look badass, but it was also the perfect typing to counter Spinel's Behem. What's interesting about this situation though is that it seems like Spinel was just trying to size up Friede more than anything, and didn't really take a loss, as his main objective was to get Liko's pendant, and he did just that. This guy does not mess around. I can only wonder what's to come next after this. This episode's rating is an 8 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons, episode 15. Someone we can't see. Who's a what's it? So it looks like Liko's pendant wasn't the only thing she lost, cause she's lost her memory as well. This was really interesting, as it seems like Liko's memories were reset to before she joined the Rising Voltaclers. I was a little worried about how this might be handled, but I think the episode did a pretty good job. I like how she gets these little deja vu moments that helped her slowly regain her memory. Now while she's off contemplating her existence, the Rising Voltaclers are looking for Liko, but are kinda useless since Spinel is still messing around with them. Also, Roy chases his Watchro from Artisan to Levincia, and like, how? Is Paldea that small? I refuse to believe that. It was a little too convenient how that happened, but I get that they wanted to have all three starters together, cause Dot finally decided to touch grass. Alright, all jokes aside, she was the MVP of the episode. She really tried her hardest to find Liko, and even set up a collab stream with Gym Leader Iono to do so. This was pretty cool. Seeing them together, it's something we were all anticipating for a while now. Don't you just love when content creators cross over? As cool as this was though, I am a bit disappointed that they already had an established relationship beforehand. I mean, it kinda makes sense for them to, but I just think it would have been so much cooler if their first interaction was on screen and, you know, we get to see that friendship form. When it comes to Iono, she's actually not here for that long, but at least she was very in line with her characterization in the games. Since she already has connections to Dot, hopefully that just means that we can see more of her in the future. In the end, Roy and Dot eventually do find Liko, and have a pretty wholesome reunion. I especially like the moments where Dot officially meets Liko and Roy in person. Now, although Liko wasn't really in a lot of danger in this episode, it was still good to see Dot finally come out of her comfort zone for her friends. I guess all of Liko's visits paid off. In the end, although Liko regains her memories, there's still the matter of the missing pendant. So it looks like the fight against Spinel is only just getting started. This episode's rating is a 7 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons, episode 16. As Long as I'm with Quaxly. Now this episode opens up with Dot officially catching Quaxly. Feels weird considering they've been together the whole time, but I guess now they're officially partners. Here the gang tries to find Liko's stolen pendant, and comes up with the idea to check the docks. Seems like Spinel planned for this though, as he has someone waiting to take on Friede just in case. I really like how Friede is able to quickly realize he's not facing the guy he's looking for, as his battle style is completely different from when he faced Spinel. So he wastes no more time and absolutely wrecks this goon and moves on. It turns out the princess is in another boat, and Dot is the one to discover this. She honestly stood no chance, but it was great to see Quaxly refuse to give up, which in turn helped motivate Dot. It really shows how strong their bond is, even though she just caught it. The really cool moments though come from when Liko and Roy arrive. The animation was top tier here, and it was really cool to see the starters fighting alongside each other for the first time. We even get a bit of Watchro action here, and his little squabble with Fuecoco, which was actually enough to unintentionally throw Spinel off. Things get serious though when he decides to use Umbreon, which shows that he's on a completely different level. The day is ultimately saved though once Liko was able to trigger her pendant once again, releasing the Titan Arboliva from the Ancient Poké Ball. I will admit though I am a bit disappointed, as I was expecting Arboliva to wreck Spinel here, but instead it just takes the kids and leaves. The episode ends with Spinel reporting his failure to the rest of the explorers, and this also serves as a reveal for the rest of the admins. These characters look so cool, man. I cannot wait to see their role in the series. I like how there's still a lot of mystery to unfold, especially in regards to Liko's connection with the pendant. I'll tell you what mystery is finally solved though, the time it would take for Liko to realize that Dot is Nidothing. cause she ended up telling her. Thank God, cause I could not sit through another episode of Liko being dumb about that. It was getting a little annoying. So all in all, this was a really solid episode. It was visually fantastic, set up Dot as a proper character alongside Liko and Roy, and gave us much more to look forward to regarding the explorers. This episode's rating is an 8 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons, episode 17. Wattrel and Fuecoco, special training. So continuing from the last episode, it seems that Wattrel and Fuecoco aren't really getting along. Specifically, Wattrel just can't stand Fuecoco. It's funny to see these two interact, especially since Fuecoco seems pretty oblivious. Clearly he just likes spending time with Wattrel, but he doesn't realize he's annoying the heck out of him. Roy is really struggling with these two, but after seeing a training battle between Charizard and Captain Pikachu, he gets the idea of having them battle together to hopefully relieve their stress and hopefully help them form a bond together. So once again, it's time to train with Captain Pikachu. And as you'd expect, Roy is still no match for him. Now something interesting to note is the fact that Wattrel seems to be looking up to Captain Pikachu because of their shared electric typing, similar to how Fuecoco looks up to Charizard. So it really seems like Friede's Pokemon are going to be the role models for Roy's team. Now afterwards, the ship runs into a little bit of turbulence, and because of Roy's Pokemon fighting, they accidentally stay outside the ship when they should have been inside, leading them to get caught up in some trouble. But this actually proved to be beneficial, as this is the first time Wattrel gets to use a fully powered Spark. And thanks to a talk with Dot, they realized that Wattrel can reach its full potential if it can ride the winds properly. This was a nice way to get Dot involved, especially since the last episode finally gave Liko the reveal that this is Nidothing. And it's kind of funny because now in this episode, Liko's all nervous and anxious around Dot because now she knows she's a Nidothing and she's like, oh my god, I can't believe I'm in Nidothing's room. And it was fine for this episode, but I really hope this doesn't continue on. It's Dot at the end of the day. In the end, after a long night of training, Roy is able to come up with a really weird combo involving himself that actually proves to be beneficial. He actually made Captain Pikachu use a move. It's very rare to see trainers actively be a part of the battle. That was pretty cool, but in the end, still not enough. But yeah, all in all, this episode was pretty straightforward. It's just a training episode, nothing too crazy. But at the very least, it does give some more development and progression for Roy and his Pokemon. Also, a little neat part about this episode as well is that now Liko is starting to consider catching another Pokemon, as she can see that, you know, this can be pretty beneficial. This episode's rating is a 5 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons, episode 18. Flying Pikachu, soaring high. After witnessing his interesting behavior in the battle against Roy, Liko, Roy, and Dot want to learn more about Captain Pikachu. This leads to Friede finally explaining the origin of Captain Pikachu. One of my favorite aspects of this episode is the world building that it does for this series. Right away we learned that Friede used to be a researcher, but kinda lost his passion for it, so he's been chilling in Paldea on Ludlow's boat. Things reach a turning point for him though after he meets Liko's mother, who was actually his old school teacher back in Kanto, which is pretty cool. And is that Larry? This was so cool as it starts to fill in the gaps and answer some of the questions we might have had in previous episodes. It's thanks to Luca that Friede is introduced to Pikachu, who reignites Friede's passion for research after seeing his ability to soar in the air. It's something he's never seen before. I love this cause Friede thought he knew all there is to know about Pokemon, but after seeing this rare anomaly, it made him realize that there's still so much more to Pokemon. It was so cool and inspiring, and this is a very real thing that happens to all of us. Sometimes we kinda lose our passion when we're caught in a monotonous routine. He was tired of being cooped up in the lab all day, and this Pikachu finally gave him something to be excited about. But what I love is that simply studying this Pikachu wasn't enough, as Friede got exhausted of that too. Eventually, he decides to soar high with Pikachu as well, allowing him to finally experience and learn why Pikachu flies, to see this beautiful horizon. I see what you did there, Pokemon. It was cool to see that they were able to find that passion that brought them together, and this is what kicked off the Rising Voltaclers. Man, was this just an outstanding episode in my opinion. It was cool to see how this interesting group came to be, and how everything was connected from the start. I also relate so hard to the main theme of this episode about pursuing your true passion. Of course we saw this focus with Friede, but we even saw this with Orla, who was working a regular job, but decided to join Friede for a more fulfilling experience. This episode just made the Rising Voltaclers so much cooler to me, and has gotten me even more invested and attached to them, much like how Liko, Roy, and Dot felt at the end of the episode. This episode's rating is a 10 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons, episode 19, The Truth About Alchemy. In this episode, the Rising Voltaclers arrive at the Galar Region, and before they can reach Hammerlock, the gang make a pit stop at Motostoke since their trains aren't running yet. Now right away, what's awesome about this episode is being able to see and explore Motostoke since it got shafted in the last series. Roy also shows interest in meeting Kabu in hopes of learning more about Rayquaza since Kabu is from the Hoenn region. And although that wasn't really happening in this episode, it was still cool to see details like that from the games play a relevant part in this narrative. The main focus of this episode though is on Murdoch, who comes across a former rival of his at the Battle Cafe that brings out a side of him that Liko and Roy have never seen before. Turns out they used to run a bakery together with the help of Milcery, but once it had evolved into an alchemy form that benefited Murdoch's pastries more, it caused a rift in their friendship. On top of giving us a backstory to Murdoch, this adds a bit more depth to his character, at least to the eyes of Liko, cause up until this point he was seen as one of the more mature and level-headed members of the Rising Voltacklers. But here we get a moment of weakness from Murdoch, as he even realized that he was so caught up with his success that he didn't notice that it was affecting his friend until it was too late. Shows that although he's an adult, he's still a human, capable of making mistakes just like Liko and Roy. Funny enough though, this theme is brought back in the end when Roy is shocked to see Murdoch and Mitchell crying it out once they reconcile. To which Liko responds by saying adults can cry too. You're damn right, Liko. The way they get to that point was also funny because it starts off as a tense double battle, but quickly devolves into a bake-off that not only allowed them to both let out some steam, but also relive their good old days when they used to bake with alchemy. It's here where Mitchell also admits that he got so caught up with envy that he couldn't embrace alchemy's evolution to truly make his pastry succeed. Honestly, I was surprised with how good this episode turned out to be. Amidst some of the goofiness and subtle shades of ex-boyfriend vibes, this episode is really a story about how adults are no different than kids. At the end of the day, we're all imperfect, capable of making mistakes, and equal part capable of correcting them. Wow, I was not expecting this to be that deep. Also, Kabu jump scare. This episode's rating is an 8 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons, episode 20. Kabu's battle training. Continuing from the last episode, Liko and Roy meet Kabu to ask about the shiny Rayquaza. However, my mans is on the workout grind right now, so they're gonna have to ask him at the gym. Once they do ask him though, similar to Brassius, Kabu decides to train them in order to help them be prepared to face Rayquaza. That's his nice way of saying they're weak. The training in this episode was surprisingly fun. They take part in Kabu's point-based gym mission, consisting of Liko having to put out Litwick's fire, while Roy has to light them up. The purpose of this training is to hone Sprigatito's Leafage and Fuecoco's Ember. In the first half, Liko does surprisingly well, coming up with these different variations of Leafage that help her gain a huge advantage. Meanwhile, Roy picks things up by doing his famous Fuecoco chant. This was great as it showed both trainers were slowly improving in their own way, until Liko decides to throw the contest cause she didn't want Roy to lose. Okay, the second half of the episode is where Liko and Roy face Kabu in a tag battle along with his apprentice Wakaba. In the beginning, Liko and Roy are no match for Kabu's Centiskorch. This is great to see as Galar gym leaders are far stronger than average, so Horizons is being pretty consistent here. Roy and Fuecoco do have a cool moment though, where we see the strength of their bond, which leads to Fuecoco learning Flamethrower. Meanwhile, Liko easily gives up against Wakaba because she wants her to become a gym trainer. You've gotta be kidding me. Now in terms of this episode, this serves as a moment of development as Kabu brings up her weakness of putting others' feelings before herself. It shows that she still has some more maturing to do, and it's the perfect segue to the next episode. My problem with this, however, is that it's starting to feel like Roy is getting more progression and spotlight than Liko at this point, even though she's the first character we've been following. Like, even when they learn that Rayquaza's headed to the Galar Mines, they decide to take a detour and focus on that instead of seeing Liko's grandmother, their original purpose for being in Galar. Liko's kinda being a pushover right now, and I don't really like it. But all in all though, I think this was a solid episode. I just hope Liko's able to catch up to Roy soon, cause right now she's starting to feel like the secondary character. This episode's rating is a 7 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons, episode 21, The Lonely Hatenna. Continuing from last week, Liko is struggling to figure out what kind of trainer she wants to be. Roy has a very clear path with Rayquaza, and even Anne has caught her own Pokemon and knows what she wants to do, but Liko does not. There's even a moment where Roy asks her to choose a literal path in the road, and even then she can't even make up her mind. This was all to set up her encounter with Hatenna, which I honestly think was handled really well. Right away, Liko can tell that something is wrong with it, so she decides to take it back to the ship so that Molly can help. What's notable here is that now she's the one who's delaying Roy's Rayquaza quest, putting her desire to help this Pokemon over Roy's, which contrasts the last episode where Roy basically hijacked Liko's mission to find her grandmother. It finally puts Liko in a more active role, which is a sign of good things to come for her character. Turns out Hatena isn't really hurt, but is just lonely and is struggling to deal with many emotions. And ironically, it's now thrusted into the Rising Voltacular ship, filled to the brim with colorful characters and varying emotions. As Liko tries to understand what Hatena is going through, she asks Dot for some advice, and she gives a pretty good analogy, comparing it to the fluctuating emotions she gets from all her positive and negative comments. I can definitely relate with you there, Dot. As a Pokemon who can sense people's emotions, Hatena's feeling the same thing. Liko's able to connect with it though when she realizes that she went through the same thing when she first joined the ship. This was a cool parallel, as even Orla points out that Liko was all nervous and worried about what everyone else was thinking about her when she first joined. This was a great way to bring them closer together, and finally gave both Liko and Hatena someone to relate to. So it's only natural that in the end, Hatena decides to stay with Liko, with a little push from Sprigatito as well, the same Pokemon that helped push Liko out of her shell at the start of this journey. This was the perfect first capture for Liko, that helped her realize she wants to be a trainer who understands Pokemon's feelings. The episode ends with Amicio going rogue and taking the pendant mission into his own hands, so it seems like the plot is really going to be picking up next time. This episode's rating is an 8 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons, episode 22, Clash, Galar Mine. Liko, Roy, and Friede have arrived at the Galar Mine in search of Rayquaza, and right away, Hatena senses that something's off. Could it be that Amicio's here? Not really, but that is cool. In the beginning of the episode, there's actually a scene where Murdoch was expecting to have a cup of coffee, but is caught off guard when it's just actually black tea. Seems kinda random and funny to include, but it's actually foreshadowing the events to come. This whole scene teaches how assumptions can be dangerous, just like how Roy assumes he'd be meeting Rayquaza, but instead gets Galarian Moltres out of all things. I don't think any of us were expecting to see this. Although I do like the hints with the wild Pokemon being terrified, Hatena responding to its malicious emotions, and even the claw marks that Friede discovers. This Moltres is actually holding an Ancient Poké Ball, making it the third Pokemon belonging to Lucius. Now, even though I enjoyed everything with Moltres in the second half, I do want to address the complaints I have in the beginning. It's Roy. I don't know about you, but I found him annoying in this episode. When Liko and Roy get separated from Friede, they're told to stay put so that Friede can find them, but Roy insistently continues to explore the mine in search of Rayquaza, even ignoring Liko's constant warnings. He continues to go deeper within the mine, which did lead them to Moltres, but without Friede, they were no match at all. His actions put them in danger, and the only reason they survived was because Cap was there to save them. Can we get some 07s in the chat for Cap, by the way? He really had to take one for the team today. I will say though, it was great to see Liko and Roy muster up the strength to keep fighting even though their literal spirits were being consumed. A for effort, I guess, but still not enough though. While this is happening, Friede runs into Amicio again, and I love how they just pick up and get back into battling like they never left. I love their rivalry so much. Their part of the episode was pretty cool and entertaining. The episode ends with Liko and Roy escaping with Cap, but Friede and Amicio being trapped with Moltres. So here's to hoping we get an epic team up from the two in the next episode, and even some redemption for Roy's actions. This episode's rating is a 7 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons, episode 23, Burning Galarian Moltres. After last week's insane cliffhanger, Liko and Roy are now healed up and must come up with a plan to save Friede. Oh, never mind, he's here now.
What? What the fuck?
This just might be one of the biggest L's from Pokemon Horizons so far. What was the point of trapping Friede with Amicio if they weren't gonna do anything with them? Not only were we robbed of a cool moment, seeing these two adversaries team up, but it also would have given Liko and Roy an even greater call to action aside from collecting the Ancient Poké Ball. It's unfortunate because this is actually a really good episode, but it's dragged down because they completely wasted their setup from the previous one. Here the gang come up with the strategy to use Sprigatito's Sweet Scent to calm down Moltres. By the way, when I say Sweet Scent, I don't mean the move Sweet Scent, I mean Sprigatito's actual scent that is sweet. You get the point. This was actually a pretty clever strategy, except Sprigatito's weak. What I like about the situation is that they aren't even battling for the sake of battling, as Liko's trying to figure out what's causing Moltres' anger. It was a great way to show Liko taking steps towards her goal to understand the feelings of Pokemon. Eventually, Arboliva comes to assist it with grassy terrain, which helps boost Sprigatito's leafage. That on top of the gust of wind from Wattrel and Charizard helps the Sweet Scent finally reach Moltres and calm it down. It was some awesome teamwork. Then we get the return of Terapagos, who creates this weird Lucius illusion, or spirit, I'm not quite sure, which sets up even more mystery as we get the name drop of Rakua. Rukia? I don't know who that is yet, but I will say now that we have a better look at Lucius, he just might be an ancestor of Liko, but only time will tell, I suppose. Also, it looks like Terapagos isn't going back to its pendant form anymore, which is pretty exciting, And now when you think about it, does that mean that Liko has Titan Arboliva, Galarian Moltres, and a Terapagos with her? That's kinda crazy. Is she the new Tobias or something? So all in all, this was a pretty solid episode. But again, the way it just completely disregarded the last episode really messed with my enjoyment. This was good, but it should have been so much better. Like, where the heck was Amethio? He was completely wasted, man. This episode's rating is a 6 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons, episode 24 to 26. First up, episode 24, Reunion at the Old Castle. With Galarian Moltres obtained and Terapagos out of its pendant form, it's finally time to meet Liko's grandmother. They eventually arrive at Hammerlock and follow Squawkabilly to the— is this my first time saying that Pokemon's name? Feels so weird. They follow the bird to the secret passageway to Liko's grandmother. What's really cool here is the use of Stonejourner as the gatekeeper. Really nice touch. Meanwhile, thanks to the intel of Amethio, the explorers begin their mission to retrieve Terapagos. What's interesting is that the butler, Hamber, is taking a more active role here, and it's eventually revealed that he's a friend of Liko's grandmother. Now this makes things a lot more interesting, and raises so many more questions. How did they meet? What is their past? Luckily, this episode does provide some of the answers we've been waiting for, mostly about Diana and the pendant. Once we reach the castle, we get the backstory regarding the pendant, and how Diana found it in her attic as a little girl and learned about Lucius and Terapagos through a book of his notes. This is what actually inspired her to go on her journey, and eventually she gave the pendant to Liko before starting Indigo Academy, but shortly after was approached by Hamber, which is why the Rising Volticlers were hired, you know, to protect Liko. This was so cool as it finally gave us more context surrounding the beginning of the series. But also, like I said, it just raises so many more questions that I just want to know about now. Like, why was Lucius's stuff in Diana's house? Was he a relative? Why did Terapagos never reveal itself to her but it does to Liko? And where is this Rakua place that Lucius spoke of? We learned in this episode that it's actually the paradise he and his Pokemon lived in, and my money is that it's Area 0. So yeah, I enjoyed this episode. It was a nice breather from the last one, and it was great to finally get to know Diana, while slowly building up to the confrontation for the next episode. This episode's rating is a 7 out of 10. Episode 25, Rivals in the Night. This episode is a non-stop action that kept my eyes glued to the screen. In order to protect Liko and Roy while they wait for the Rising Volticlers, Friede uses himself as a decoy to distract Amethio. And can I just say, I love the banter this guy throws at him. Friede is so damn cool. Friede is actually on the defensive, keeping Cerulege at a distance to avoid activating weak armor. What's cool though is that Amethio knows something is up because Friede isn't battling like his normal self. So he sends Debris Charizard's way, forcing it to use Dragon Claw to protect itself, which Cerulege then takes on purpose to activate its ability. Man, I gotta give it to Amethio, that was a great strat. After this though, Friede decides to say screw it, I'm fighting for real, and terrestrializes Charizard to absolutely nuke Cerulege with Terra Blast. This is the first time the two actually get to finish a battle. Kinda nuts. The next battle, while short, is Liko and Roy versus Anya and Zerk. And what I like about this fight is that it shows the progression Liko and Roy have made thus far. This is probably the most realistic fight they had against them because we've had time to see them improve, so the win feels justified. It's all cut short, however, when Onix and Sango arrive. I love the way they build up to their appearance, with Garganacl's Salt Cure affecting wild Pokemon and Glalie lowering the temperature. It was an awesome way to make their presence known. But just then, the GOAT Captain Pikachu arrives to take them both on. And dude pushes them so far that Sango loses it and makes Glalie use self-destruct as a last resort. Nice try, but it didn't work though. Now while this is happening, we get the confrontation between Diana and Hamber. And it's here where it's revealed that the Explorers are what Lucius's friends were called. This is kinda crazy, and again, I have so many questions. So why are the Explorers the bad guys? Are these like the descendants of Lucius's friends? Man, I wanna know so badly. The episode ends with the crew getting away, and Diana sharing with Liko Lucius's memoir, urging her to find the remaining hero Pokemon, Lapras, Kleavor, and Entei. Now this is how you end off the first saga of Pokemon Horizons. This episode's rating is a 9 out of 10. Episode 26, Terapagos' Adventure. We've officially entered the next arc in Pokemon Horizons, Terapagos' Shine. And this first episode was alright, I guess. The first half of the episode consists of Terapagos shenanigans, where it's wandering around the ship and it's experiencing all these new things for the first time. And of course, Liko's freaking out because she lost it. Kinda similar to when Hatena first joined, but with Terapagos being more curious and adventurous. During this time, Liko decides to observe and record Terapagos' behavior, just like she did with Sprigatito in the first episode. This was pretty neat to see, but as you can tell, this makes the first half of the episode feel a little repetitive, as it's basically just a mixture of Sprigatito and Hatena's introduction episodes. There's a nice moment later on though, where Liko comforts Sprigatito as it kinda felt neglected, but Liko thanks it as this all happened due to their meeting. The second half focuses on Diana explaining to Liko Lucius's memoir, and aside from the picture we see that finally gives us a better look at him, again, this feels a little repetitive. This is just a more detailed conversation of the last two episodes, and them theorizing that Terapagos wants to find the Rakua paradise. We do get a bit more context though, which is helpful, basically implying that the group might achieve Terapagos' true form once they reunite all the Pokemon. And Liko even gets Lucius's belt to hold the Ancient Poké Balls. Talk about drip. The episode ends with Liko telling the Rising Voltacklers her new mission, and with them fully being on board. I love this crew so much. According to Dot, there have been tons of Rayquaza sightings in Galar still, so it looks like we're still going to be exploring this region a little while longer. There's also this scene with Amicio at the end, and although not much was said, it seems like the boy is in deep thought after his loss against Friede. I sense some development coming. So in the end, this episode kinda felt like a reintroduction of sorts. Nothing groundbreaking happened, but instead just reacquainting us with Liko and her Pokemon, and of course her main objective moving forward. This episode's rating is a 5 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons, episode 27, As Long As I'm With My Friends. Following the Rayquaza sightings mentioned by Dot, the Rising Voltacklers take to the wild area in search of clues, except it was all fake. So instead, they try to make the most out of the situation and have fun making curry. Now I will say, it was nice to just see the gang hang out, which allowed the Paldea starters to interact more, but this episode was basically just another one of those where Liko tries to help Dot touch grass. There's nothing wrong with that as it does help develop their friendship, but it feels like we're kinda just filling up time until the next plot point happens. It's kind of annoying too, cause technically we have no leads now, so naturally it makes us wonder where we're gonna go next, but instead we just spend the whole episode making curry. Great, just what we needed. The episode does end with Diana revealing that she knows someone who owns an antique shop who could potentially know something about the Ancient Poké Ball, so at least we have some direction for the next episode, but this just makes this episode feel even more pointless. Like, if we skipped this episode and had Diana mention this in the previous one, nothing would really change other than Liko and Dot boosting their friendship side a little bit. Even the part with the explorers doesn't seem that important, as all it really revealed is that they were the ones who made the fake Rayquaza sightings. Aside from being a Dot-focused episode, this also just felt like an excuse to show off some of the things the wild area has to offer, like the Onyx that first appears when you enter, the Greedent that steals berries, and even the hiker guy that gives you ingredients.
Wait a minute!
Alright, this is pretty interesting, cause is this the same hiker that Ash and Go met? Is this really how Horizons confirms that this takes place in the same world as Journeys? I'm definitely not the only one who thinks this, and it doesn't help that Dot makes a video featuring Ash Pokemon like Pikachu, Gengar, Dragonite, and even Snorlax. Now yeah, there's also a Psyduck and Electrode who Ash doesn't own, but still, 4 out of 6 Ash Pokemon is a crazy coincidence. Now I don't really like to talk about how every little thing might connect to Ash, but you can't blame me this time. This almost feels like an intentional Easter egg by the anime staff. Aside from that though, as I said, this was a pretty uneventful episode. So this episode's rating is a 4 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons, episode 28, The Stolen Treasure. In this episode, Liko, Roy, and Friede visit an old friend of Diana's who could possibly know a thing or two about the Ancient Poké Ball. Although he comes off a little shady, he's actually gone on a few adventures with Diana back in the day, and he stole the Poké Ball. Didn't see that one coming. That was sarcasm, by the way. So yeah, this was definitely an episode. There's a funny moment where the old dude pulls a fast one on Friede, and when Charizard tries to chase him down, he accidentally knocks over a bunch of vending stands. As a result, Friede has to stay behind and clean up his mess like a responsible adult, so it's up to the two kids to stop the criminal alone. Now what's annoying is that this whole situation could have been avoided from the jump if Liko had just listened to Hatena, as she did pick up on his bad intentions. However, haha, look, Fuecoco and Roy are hungry, so let's just ignore Hatena and move on so that we can deal with this problem for the rest of the episode. This is so funny, right guys? That was sarcasm again, so if it wasn't obvious already, I did not like this episode. It was just Liko and Roy chasing this dude the whole time, them trying to have a battle but are losing, so Captain Pikachu has to make the save at the very end. Now don't get me wrong, I love a good Captain Pikachu moment, but making him save Liko and Roy this often just undermines their skills and makes them look extremely weak. What this episode tells me is that Friede could have easily handled this from the beginning, which makes the Charizard moment unfunny now, cause the whole point of that was to hold him back so that we can drag this boring plot. You know what that sounds like to me? That sounds like Oh wait, technically it's not filler because we learned at the end of the episode that the old dude was gonna sell the Ancient Poké Ball to a Pokeball craftsman. So this is what's gonna lead us into the next episode, I guess. I don't know about you, but I feel kind of insulted that we have to sit through another episode of nothing just for some crumbs of information that may or may not connect to the plot. Just give us the plot. Not gonna lie, this ain't a great start for the second arc. At least next up's an Orla episode. This episode's rating is a 3 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons, episode 29, Orla and the Pokeball Craftsman. After learning about the Pokeball Craftsman, Liko, Roy, and Friede head to her factory in hopes of learning more about the Ancient Pokeball, and it turns out she knows absolutely nothing. Well, at least Orla's here. Alright, starting off with the good, it was pretty cool to see some of these new and original Pokeballs, even though some of them are really impractical. They have some really interesting gimmicks, and it was fun to see Roy try them out. We even got to see a Hisuian Pokeball, so that was neat. It was also great to get lots of Orla screen time in this episode. It actually starts out with us seeing how much everyone depends on her in the ship, and then when we get to the Pokeball factory, we can see her using her expertise to help optimize the performance of Karna's Pokeball machine. This actually leads to Karna asking Orla to stay, but like we all know she won't, so there was really no tension here. At least for the audience, Liko's over here freaking out. We do get a nice moment between her and Liko though, where we learn more about her past and how she thought she was happy with her previous job, but she learned that she loves to test her skills and try new things. So working alongside someone as spontaneous as Friede is actually perfect for her. And now for the parts I didn't like about this episode. Although it was great to flesh out Orla a bit, the episode doesn't really take full advantage of this, as there's also this subplot of Roy testing out the Pokeballs, which accidentally causes a Galarian Weezing to attack. Orla does get a cool moment to take care of it, but it's immediately undermined once a horde of them show up, and you guessed it, Captain Pikachu makes the save. Okay, this is starting to get old. They could have at least given Orla the big save this time. This was her episode after all. Overall, this was fine. I just think Orla deserved better. And again, when are we gonna actually focus on the plot? Right now it just feels like we're on a wild goose chase that led to absolutely nowhere. This episode's rating is a 5 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons, episode 30, the Slipping Smashing Mystery Pokemon. The episode starts with Liko and Roy training against Friede and Captain Pikachu. However, it's interrupted when Fuecoco slips on a mysterious liquid. This leads to Liko and Roy investigating its origin, which also includes this weird clanging sound that they've been hearing. Turns out this was caused by a wild poltergeist that made its way onto the ship. Now initially I thought I wasn't going to enjoy this much as it seemed like it was just going to be a boring mystery solving episode, but thankfully they didn't actually focus much on the mystery aspect. Instead, the focus was on Poltegeist and its interactions with the other Pokemon on the ship. It was nice to see a lot of these Pokemon that don't typically get a lot of screen time have some time to shine with some fun moments. Aside from Fuecoco's constant slipping, the funniest part has to be when Poltegeist gets jealous of Shuckle's juice-making abilities, so bro literally wants to throw hands with it to assert its dominance. This leads to Cap facilitating a literal secret fighting ring so that they can squash their beef. Huh, I was not expecting Pokemon Fight Club of all things, but here we are. Eventually, Liko and Roy do figure out what's going on, and I like how Liko chooses to not get involved with the fun to allow the Pokemon to have their time alone. It was a nice way of showing how she's gradually starting to understand how Pokemon feel. So as I said, I think focusing on the Pokemon interactions was the greatest strength of this episode. I don't know about you, but I feel like I've been so focused on the human characters that I sometimes forget that a lot of these Pokemon on the ship are just wild Pokemon that have made their home here. So it was really nice to see them get their shine, and even get their own new member of the crew with Poltegeist. And Sinistea? Yeah, it seems like Poltegeist just kinda gave birth in Diana's teacup, so now we've also got a Sinistea on board. So overall, I think this was a pretty good episode. And now it has me looking forward to what other Pokemon we could potentially see join the ship as well. This episode's rating is a 7 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons, episode 31, The Song in the Mist. After what felt like way too long for this series, we finally got back to the actual plot of Pokemon Horizons. In it, the group focuses on their search for Lucius's Lapras, and I find it really interesting that Diana knew about the rumors all along and chooses now to disclose this information. So like, what was the point of the previous 5 episodes? We could have just started the arc with this, but I digress. It seems like Lapras has been spotted helping out ships that get lost in the Misty Seas. So after getting a lead from Lapras' most recent appearance, the gang takes to the ocean in hopes of encountering it themselves. Really cool to see the Rising Voltacular ship actually on the ocean. It did start out as a fishing boat after all. Now what I appreciate about this episode is that it seems like there's a lot more layers to this story other than just finding Lapras, because although they do find it, there are also some other factors that make things a bit more complicated for the crew. For instance, the group that got saved by Lapras, although they were helped out, they did end up losing their cargo for some reason, and we even see it when the Rising Volt tacklers are at sea. Friede and Diana also notice how unnaturally quick the mist seems to appear before Lapras makes the save, and there's also some wild Pokemon that shouldn't be living out here, somehow making their way onto the ship. It paints the picture that there's a greater mystery to unravel, and leave it to the man himself, Friede, to figure it out. After a second attempt at finding Lapras, Friede comes up with a plan to use Captain Pikachu's Rising Volt tackle, oh my god, he did it, he did the thing, to clear the mist and reveal a group of Pokemon who are trying to steal their food. Before even touching on that, can I just say how damn cool that was? Easily the best part of the episode. So yeah, it seems like Lapras isn't as noble as we thought, as it's actually part of this huge scam to steal from wandering ships. I'll give Horizons credit, that's a pretty interesting twist. I've never seen such a hardcore and menacing Lapras. So overall, although kind of slow at first, this was a decent setup for Lapras' introduction, and the ending especially has me more intrigued to learn about these Pokemon's backstory. This episode's rating is a 6 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons, episode 32, Lapras' thoughts for its companions. Continuing from the last episode, Lapras is revealed to be stealing from the Rising Volt tacklers, and even after seeing its old friend Terapagos, it still decides to continue the attack on the ship. Honestly, you gotta respect the hustle. Now, as per usual, the group are pretty useless until Friede and Captain Pikachu arrive, but we also get Diana in as well, so that was a nice change of pace. Unfortunately, the action was not that great in this episode, as it mostly consisted of still shots, which aren't very dynamic. It felt like I was watching a slideshow. Once the Lapras pirates get away, we get a bit of downtime where Friede and Diana explain Lapras' true intentions, and honestly, this slowed down the episode for me. I get that they had to explain this to Liko and Roy, but all this information was already revealed to the audience last week through Friede's actions. This comes across as the anime not having faith in us to be able to understand what happened last week, by literally taking up time to explain the obvious. Now, Liko actually does pick up on Lapras' hesitation when it sees Terapagos. This again is in line with Liko's goal of trying to understand Pokemon's feelings, which allowed her to get through to Lapras in the end. We then get another vision of Lucius, and a much better look at him this time, revealing he made a promise to his Pokemon to meet again in the Rockua Paradise. This helps us understand the hero's Pokemon a bit better as we now know their true goals and intentions. And as expected, in the end, Lapras joins the group as well. So overall, this episode definitely took the safe and predictable approach. I feel like they had a pretty interesting concept about a badass Lapras pirate, but they didn't really do much to expand on it. They mostly just went, hey, that's just what wild Pokemon gotta do to survive, and then moved on. I will say though, there is a pretty epic moment where Ludlow and Quagsire help defend the ship from the Pokemon. Ludlow was so awesome here, and Quagsire using Surf went crazy. It was just a small segment of the episode, but I'm glad the GOAT got his time to shine. The episode does end with Shiny Rayquaza showing up though, so it looks like things are really gonna start picking up soon. This episode's rating is a 4 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons, episode 33. The Roaring Black Rayquaza. This episode starts out strong, with Shiny Rayquaza making an appearance and Amicio making a return to take it on. This was awesome, as I was not expecting so much action in the beginning. While Amicio's battle is happening, we also have Roy calling out to Rayquaza, getting mad because he wanted to be the one to challenge it like he actually had a chance against it or something. Alright Roy, keep telling yourself that. Anyways, back to Amicio versus Rayquaza. Oh wait, it's over. Well, that was quick. Hey, at least we got a confrontation between Rayquaza and Terapagos, and we even get to see it go into its Terrestrial form for the first time, so that was pretty cool. It does hold its own for a second, but then reverts back to normal, so Rayquaza leaves immediately after that. Wait, what do you mean we're only halfway through the episode? So unfortunately, most of the hype of this episode is contained in the first 10 minutes. Now that's not to say that the rest of the episode isn't good, but just that they've really built up to this episode to focus on the Rayquaza battle, when it really isn't just about that. Sure, we get some exposition between Diana and Friede where it's believed that Rayquaza wants to challenge Terapagos at its strongest, but I just wish that had lasted a bit longer. The rest of the episode focuses on Diana revealing that she'll be leaving on her own journey, but not before testing Liko and Roy's strength. This section was fine, but again, it wasn't the main part that was advertised. I literally had no idea this was gonna happen. Liko and Roy are able to overcome the challenge to land one hit on Arcanine, and although it was great to see them work together to achieve this goal, it still makes them look incredibly weak. I get it's supposed to show their growth, but if they're struggling this much against Arcanine, what makes them think they have any chance against Rayquaza? Yeah, they're still newbies, but I feel like the two should be a bit stronger by now. At least Amicio gets it. This man is getting ready for some serious training. This episode's rating is a 6 out of 10. Let's review Pokemon Horizons, episode 34, Respective Departures. The time has come for Diana to leave the Rising Voltaclers, and once Liko and Roy find out, they decide to plan a farewell party for her. It was really nice to see them come together and honor her, and we even get a video of Dot recapping their time together. Remember that terrible episode? Now, although Diana's farewell is the main focus, there were a lot of smaller details that actually added more to the enjoyment of the episode. First off is Needlething's video on terrestrialization, featuring an actual sponsorship. That was pretty funny. Turns out, Iono hooked her up with the sponsor since wearing caps isn't really her style, but actually worked out pretty well for Dot since her whole video was related to terrestrialization. And speaking of which, this video sponsored by, I'm just kidding, I'm not sponsored. But you can actually get this cap in the game using the code WearTerrassleCap, which is awesome. Anyways, it was nice to see Iono once again, and I like how Dot thinks the video would have been better if she actually terrestrialized, potentially teasing her and the others getting a Terra Orb. Very interesting considering Friede confirms they're returning to Paldea to learn about Terapagos' connection to terrestrialization. And continuing with the Terra theme, after his humiliating defeat against Rayquaza, Amicio asks Hammer to train him. And this is my favorite part of the episode. I feel like the last one didn't really do Amicio justice, so it was nice to see him get more time to shine, and get absolutely wrecked once Hammer whips out the Terra Orb. Well, at least the battle was pretty cool, and it also shows that Hammer ain't no pushover. Eventually though, Hammer does pass off the Terra Orb to Amicio, making him a much bigger threat now, so I can't wait to see where he goes next. That's not all though, as we also get some of the other explorers observing the training, and it seems like they're gonna be gunning for Rayquaza before him. So overall, I think this was a good way to wrap up these batch of episodes featuring Diana. She got a wholesome send-off, and now it's on to the next part where we'll hopefully learn more about Terapagos. This episode's rating is a 7 out of 10.